And then let's make sure this is muted so I don't accidentally play myself over myself. Okay, go to live control room, starting, and it looks like we are ready to go. Good morning, everyone. I am Leonard French, your favorite copyright attorney. We are here, hopefully, online. Why does it say stream offline? Now it says starting. I really hope this is working.
I am checking right now.
Watch video? How about that? We'll do watch
video.
Nope, that's their video. Let's pop out chat, because that's going to be fun to watch. Stream options, low latency. Oh, monetize should be on. Oh, it changed it back? It changed it back to Lawful Masses with Leonard French live stream. I don't even know if we're live.
I don't see it live on YouTube. I didn't get the notification, but there is
now
a little
I see it. Now I see
red
it.
signal.
I do see that we are live. Excellent. Okay. Finally, it kicked over and went live. I'm not sure why it changed the name of the stream back.
Ooh, I see it now.
Let's see. Live, the whistleblower complaint should have been the title of this stream. And it said, let's read it together. I'm really not sure what happened here, YouTube. Like, this is what happens when you don't have a save button, when it's just supposed to save automatically. So, all right, here we are. Okay, good. Looks like everybody's here and the stream has started. So I'm not going to delay any longer because this is a YouTube live stream. We hardly ever do these. Monetization is supposed to be on, so I hope that's actually working. Monetization status on. Okay, sounds good. Great. All right. Just takes a minute to appear on the channel. Okay. That is the title and description. Great. Excellent. And we now have green stream health. Let's go. So I have not read this yet. I don't know what to expect other than the characterizations that have been made in the various postings and things. Here, actually, if you would like to start the stream with the dog, let's start the stream with the dog. Here is the dog. Here is Nico. You'll say it's probably outside.
Nico. Therapy dog.
Therapy dog. So a little bit of dog therapy before we get started here.
It's only a minor constitutional crisis.
It's only a minor constitutional crisis, Nico. It will be okay. I promise. You want to come up? You want to come up? Okay, good boy. Good boy. Good boy. I'll give you a treat in a moment. Hang on, let me finish with my glasses here. Oh, we've got both dogs. We've got both dogs here. Come here. Come here. Oh, good. Good. Good boy. Good boy. Here, have a little piece. Okay, off, so Ilsa can do it. Get off. Ilsa, come. Come up. Up. Good girl, I know you're old. I know you're old. Oh, don't jump on her. She's old. She's almost 8. Anyway, let's get started. So this is unclassified as of, I guess, August 12th, 2019. It is a letter to Richard Burr, chairman of the Senate Committee on Intelligence, and Adam Schiff, chairman on the Select Committee on Intelligence. Dear Chairman Burr and Chairman Schiff, the unnamed author writes, I am reporting an urgent concern in accordance with the procedures outlined in 50 U.S.C. Section 3033 K5A. This letter is unclassified when separated from the attachment, and we do have the attachment, and it is fairly heavily redacted, but we'll still be able to take a look at sort of what it is. In the course of my official duties, I have received information from multiple U.S. government officials that the President of the United States is using the power of his office to solicit interference from a foreign country in the 2020 U.S. election. This interference includes, among other things, pressuring a foreign country to investigate one of the president's main domestic political rivals. The president's personal lawyer, Mr. Rudolph Giuliani, is a central figure in this effort. However, General Barr appears to be involved as well. So not Richard Burr, but rather Attorney General Barr. Over the past 4 months, More than half a dozen U.S. officials have informed me of various facts relating to this effort. The information provided herein was relayed to me in the course of an official interagency business. Excuse me. It is routine for U.S. officials with responsibility for a particular regional or functional portfolio to share such information with one another in order to inform policy making and analysis. I was not a direct witness to the events described. However, I found my colleagues' accounts of these events to be credible because, in almost all cases, multiple officials recounted fact patterns that were consistent with one another. In addition, a variety of information consistent with these private accounts has been reported publicly. I am deeply concerned that the actions described below constitute, quote, a serious or flagrant problem, abuse, or violation of law or executive order that does not include differences of opinions concerning public policy matters, consistent with the definition of an urgent concern in 50 U.S.C. 3033 K5G. I am therefore fulfilling my duty to report this information through proper legal channels to the relevant authorities. I am also concerned that these actions pose risks to U.S. national security and undermine the U.S. government's efforts to deter and counter foreign interference in U.S. elections. To the best of my knowledge, the entirety of this statement is unclassified when separated from the classified enclosure. I have endeavored to apply the classification standards outlined in Executive Order 13526 and to separate out information that I know or have reason to believe is classified for national security purposes. And there's a footnote 1 here. Apart from the information in the enclosure, it is my belief that none of the information contained herein meets the definition of classified information. There is ample open source information about the efforts I described below, including statements by the President and Mr. Giuliani. In addition, based on my personal observations, there is discretion with respect to the classification of private comments by or instructions from the President, including his communications with foreign leaders, information that is not related to U.S. foreign policy or national security, such as the information contained in this document, when separated from the enclosure, is generally treated as unclassified. I also believe that applying a classification marking to this information would violate the section of Executive Order 13526, Part 1, Section 1.7, which states that in no case shall information be classified, continue to be maintained classified, or fail to be declassified in order to conceal violations of law, inefficiency, or administrative error, or to prevent embarrassment to a person, organization, or agency. If a classification marking is applied retroactively, I believe it is incumbent upon the classifying authority to explain why such a marking was applied and to which specific information it pertains. The July 25th presidential phone call. Early in the morning of 25 July, the president spoke by telephone with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. I do not know which side initiated the call. This was the first publicly acknowledged call between the two leaders since a brief congratulatory call after Mr. Zelensky won the presidency 21st of April of this year, I'm assuming. Multiple White House officials with direct knowledge of the call informed me that after an initial exchange of pleasantries, the president used the remainder of the call to advance his personal interests. Namely, he sought to pressure the Ukrainian leader to take actions to help the president's 2020 re-election bid. According to the White House officials who had direct knowledge of the call, the president pressured Mr. Zelensky to, inter alia, which means among other things, initiate or continue an investigation into the activities of former Vice President Joseph Biden and his son, Hunter Biden. And there's a footnote here. It is unclear whether such a Ukrainian investigation exists. See footnote 7 later. Okay. to assist in purportedly uncovering that allegations of Russian interference in the 2016 U.S. presidential election originated in Ukraine, with a specific request that the Ukrainian leader locate and turn over servers used by the Democratic National Committee and examined by the U.S. cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike, which initially reported that Russian hackers had penetrated the DNC's networks in 2016. And there's a footnote 3 here. I do not know why the president associates these servers with Ukraine. See, for example, his comments to Fox News on the 20th of July, quote, "And Ukraine, take a look at Ukraine. How come the FBI didn't take this server? Podesta told them to get out. He said get out. So how come the FBI didn't take the server from the DNC?" Unquote. I don't believe we know of any server, but okay. Meet or speak with 2 people the president named explicitly as his personal envoys on these matters, Mr. Giuliani and Attorney General Barr, to whom the president referred multiple times in tandem. The president also praised Ukraine's prosecutor general, Mr. Yuri Lutsenko, and suggested that Mr. Zelensky might want to keep him in his position. Note, starting in March 2019, Mr. Lutsenko made a series of public allegations, many of which he later walked back, about the Biden family's activities in Ukraine, Ukrainian officials' purported involvement in the 2016 U.S. election, and the activities of the U.S. Embassy in Kiev. See Part 4 for additional context. The White House officials who told me this information were deeply disturbed by what had transpired in the phone call. They told me that there was already a discussion ongoing with White House lawyers about how to treat this call because of the likelihood in officials retelling that they had witnessed the president abuse his office for personal gain. The Ukrainian side was the first to publicly acknowledge the phone call. On the evening of 25 July, a readout was posted on the website of the Ukrainian president that contained the following line, a translation from original Russian language. Quote, Donald Trump expressed his conviction that the new Ukrainian government will be able to quickly improve Ukraine's image and complete the investigation of corruption cases that have held back cooperation between Ukraine and the United States. Aside from the above-mentioned cases purportedly dealing with the Biden family and the 2016 U.S. election, I was told by White House officials that no other cases were discussed. Based on my understanding, there were approximately a dozen White House officials who listened to the call, a mixture of policy officials and duty officers in the White House Situation Room, as is customary. The officials I spoke with told me that the participation in the call had not been restricted in advance because everyone expected it to be a routine call with a foreign leader. I do not know whether anyone was physically present with the president during the call. In addition to White House personnel, I was told that a State Department official, Mr. T. Ulrich Breckbull, also listened in on the call. I was not the only non-White House official to receive a readout of the call. Based on my understanding, multiple State Department and intelligence community officials were also briefed on the contents of the call as outlined above. Efforts to restrict access to records related to the call. In the days following the phone call, I learned from multiple U.S. officials that senior White House officials had intervened to lock down all records of the phone call, especially the official word-for-word transcript of the call that was produced, as is customary, by the White House Situation Room. This set of actions underscored to me that White House officials understood the gravity of what transpired in the call. And keep in mind, juxtapose that with what we're being told right now is that there was no word-for-word transcript and that only the president's summary of the thing could be released and unclassified. So there is apparently a word-for-word transcript somewhere. Maybe it's the thing that has been moved to the other server, which would seem very hypocritical if there was a private server being kept by the administration after all the stuff with Hillary and her private server and all that. White House officials told me that they were directed by White House lawyers to remove the electronic transcript from the computer system in which such transcripts are typically stored for coordination, finalization, and distribution to cabinet-level officials. Instead, the transcript was loaded into a separate electronic system that is otherwise used to store and handle classified information of an especially sensitive nature. One White House official described this act as an abuse of the electronic system because the call did not contain anything remotely sensitive from a national security perspective. So indeed, they did move the transcript from its normal place to a place where they could hide it better. I do not know whether similar measures were taken to restrict access to other records of the call, such as contemporaneous handwritten notes taken by those who listened in, which I think is what we saw was the not a transcript that was released yesterday. Ongoing concerns. On July 26th, the day after the call, U.S. Special Representative for Ukraine negotiations Kurt Volker visited Kyiv and met with President Zelensky and a variety of Ukrainian political figures. Ambassador Volker was accompanied in his meetings by U.S. Ambassador to the European Union Gordon Sondland. Based on multiple readouts of these meetings recounted to me by various U.S. officials, Ambassadors Volker and Sondland reportedly provided advice to the Ukrainian leadership about how to navigate the demands that the president had made of Mr. Zelensky. I also learned from multiple U.S. officials that on or about 2 August, Mr. Giuliani reportedly traveled to Madrid to meet with one of President Zelensky's advisors, Andriy Yermak. The U.S. officials characterized this meeting, which was not reported publicly at the time, as a direct follow-up to the president's call with Mr. Zelensky about the cases they had discussed. Separately, multiple U.S. officials told me that Mr. Giuliani had reportedly privately reached out to a variety of other Zelensky advisors, including Chief of Staff Andriy Bowden and Acting Chairman of the Security Service of Ukraine, Ivan Bakanov. I do not know whether those officials met or spoke with Mr. Giuliani, but I was told separately by multiple U.S. officials that Mr. Yermak and Mr. Bakanov intended to travel to Washington in mid-August. On 9th August, the president told reporters, I think President Zelensky is going to make a deal with President Putin, and he will be invited to the White House, and we look forward to seeing him. He's already been invited to the White House, and he wants to come. I think he will. He's a very reasonable guy. He wants to see peace in Ukraine, and I think he will be coming very soon, actually. Circumstances leading up to the 25th July presidential phone call. Beginning in late March 2019, a series of articles appeared in an online publication called The Hill. In these articles, several Ukrainian officials, most notably Prosecutor General Yuri Lutsenko, made a series of allegations against other Ukrainian officials and current and former U.S. officials. Mr. Lutsenko and his colleagues alleged, among other things, that they possessed evidence that Ukrainian officials, namely the head of the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, Artem Sitnik, and Member of Parliament Suri Leshchenko, had interfered in the 2016 U.S. presidential election, allegedly in collaboration with the DNC and the embassy in Kyiv. And there's a footnote 5. Mr. Sitnik and Mr. Leshchenko are two of Mr. Lutsenko's main domestic rivals. Mr. Lutsenko has no legal training and has been widely criticized in Ukraine for politicizing criminal probes and using his tenure as prosecutor general to protect corrupt Ukrainian officials. He has publicly feuded with Mr. Sitnik, who heads Ukraine's only competent anti-corruption body, and with Mr. Leshchenko, a former investigative journalist who has been repeatedly criticized who has repeatedly criticized Mr. Lutsenko's record. In December 2018, a Ukrainian court upheld a complaint by a member of parliament, Mr. Borislav Rosenblatt, who alleged that Mr. Sitnik and Mr. Lutsenko had interfered in the 2016 U.S. elections by publicizing a document detailing corrupt payments made by former Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych. before his ouster in 2014. Mr. Rosenblatt had originally filed the motion in late 2017 after attempting to flee Ukraine amid an investigation into his taking of a large bribe. On 16th July 2019, Mr. Leschenko publicly stated that a Ukrainian court had overturned the lower court's decision. That the U.S. Embassy in Kiev, specifically U.S. Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch, who had criticized Mr. Lutsenko's organization for its poor record in fighting corruption, had allegedly obstructed Ukrainian law enforcement agencies' pursuit of corruption cases, including by providing a do not prosecute list, and had blocked Ukrainian prosecutors from traveling to the United States expressly to prevent them from delivering their evidence about the 2016 U.S. election. There's another footnote. Mr. Lutsenko later told Ukrainian news outlet The Babel, or The Babel, I guess Babel, on April 17th, that Ambassador Yovanovitch had never provided such a list and that he was, in fact, the one who requested such a list. Then they said, let's see, this is Mr. Lutsenko and his colleagues alleged that former Vice President Biden had pressured former Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko in 2016 to fire then Ukrainian Prosecutor General Viktor Shokin in order to quash a purported criminal probe into Burisma Holdings, a Ukrainian energy company on whose board the former Vice President's son Hunter sat. And there's a footnote 7. Mr. Lutsenko later told Bloomberg on 16 May that former Vice President Biden and his son were not subject to any current Ukrainian investigations and that he had no evidence against them. Other senior Ukrainian officials also contested his original allegations. One former senior Ukrainian prosecutor told Bloomberg on 7 May that Mr. Shokin, in fact, was not investigating Burisma at the time of his removal in 2016. In several public comments, footnote 8, Mr. Lutsenko also stated that he wished to communicate directly with Attorney General Barr on these matters, footnote 9. 8 says, see, for example, Mr. Lutsenko's comments in The Hill on 1 and 7 April and his interview with the Babel on 17 April, in which he stated that he had spoken with Mr. Giuliani about arranging contact with Attorney General Barr. In May, Attorney General Barr announced that he was initiating a probe into the origins of the Russia investigation. According to the above-referenced report, 2 associates of Mr. Giuliani claimed to be working with Ukrainian officials to uncover information that would become party of this inquiry. In an interview with Fox News on 8 August, Mr. Giuliani claimed that Mr. John Durham, whom Attorney General Barr designated to lead this probe, was spending a lot of time in Europe because he was investigating Ukraine. I do not know the extent of which, if at all, Mr. Giuliani is directly coordinating his efforts on Ukraine with Attorney General Barr or Mr. Durham. These allegations by Mr. Lutsenko came on the eve of the first round of Ukraine's presidential election on 31 March. By that time, Mr. Lutsenko's political patron, President Poroshenko, was trailing Mr. Zelensky in the polls and appeared likely to be defeated. Mr. Zelensky had made known his desire to replace Mr. Lutsenko as Prosecutor General. On 21st April, Mr. Poroshenko lost the runoff to Mr. Zelensky by a landslide. See the enclosure for additional information. It was also publicly reported that Mr. Giuliani had met on at least 2 occasions with Mr. Lutsenko, once in New York in late January and again in Warsaw, Poland, right, in mid-February. In addition, it was publicly reported that Mr. Giuliani had spoken in late 2018 to former Prosecutor General Shokin in a Skype call arranged by 2 associates of Mr. Giuliani. And there's a footnote 10. See, for example, the above-referenced articles in Bloomberg 16 May and OCCRP 22 July. On 25th April, in an interview with Fox News, the president called Mr. Lutsenko's claims big and incredible and stated that the Attorney General would want to see this. On or about 29 April, I learned from U.S. officials with direct knowledge of the situation that Ambassador Jovanovic had been suddenly recalled to Washington by senior State Department officials for consultations that would most likely be removal from her position. Around the same time, I also learned from a U.S. official that associates of Mr. Giuliani were trying to make contact with the incoming Zelensky team. Footnote 11. I do not know whether these associates of Mr. Giuliani were the same individuals named in the 22 July report by OCCRP referenced above. On 6 May, the State Department announced that Ambassador Jovanovic would be ending her assignment in Kiev as planned. However, several U.S. officials told me that, in fact, her tour was curtailed because of pressure stemming from Mr. Lutsenko's allegations. Mr. Giuliani subsequently stated in an interview with a Ukrainian journalist published on 14 May that Ambassador Jovanovic was removed because she was part of the efforts against the president. Excuse me. On 9 May, the New York Times reported that Mr. Giuliani planned to travel to Ukraine to press the Ukrainian government to pursue investigations that would help the president in his 2020 re-election bid. In his multitude of public statements leading up to and in the wake of the publication of this article, Mr. Giuliani confirmed that he was focused on encouraging Ukrainian authorities to pursue investigations into alleged Ukrainian interference in the 2016 U.S. election and alleged wrongdoing by the Biden family. Footnote 12. See, for example, Mr. Giuliani's appearance on Fox News 6 April and his tweets 23 April and 10 May. In his interview with the New York Times, Mr. Giuliani stated that the president basically knows what I'm doing, sure, as his lawyer. We're not meddling in an election, we're meddling in an investigation, which we have a right to do. There's nothing illegal about it. Someone could say it's improper, and this isn't foreign policy. I'm asking them to do an investigation, and they're doing it already, and that other people are telling them to stop, and I'm going to give them reasons why they shouldn't stop it, because the information will be very, very helpful to my client and may turn out to be helpful to my government. I do have a question, though, like, whatever investigation they're asking for, like, how come they're not conducting that investigation here? Just confused. I have not heard the results of said investigation, or even anything about the veracity, the truth or falsity involved in some investigation like that. On the afternoon of 10 May, the president stated in an interview with Politico that he had planned to speak with Mr. Giuliani about the trip. A few hours later, Mr. Giuliani publicly canceled his trip, claiming that Mr. Zelensky was surrounded by enemies of the U.S. president and of the United States. On 11 May, Mr. Lutsenko met for 2 hours with President-elect Zelensky. According to a public account given several days later by Mr. Lutsenko, Mr. Lutsenko publicly stated that he had told Mr. Zelensky that he wished to remain on as prosecutor general. Starting in mid-May, I heard from multiple U.S. officials that they were deeply concerned by what they viewed as Mr. Giuliani's circumvention of the national security decision-making process to engage in Ukraine, to engage with Ukraine officials and relay messages back and forth between Kiev and the president. These officials also told me the State Department officials, including Ambassadors Volker and Sondland, had spoken with Mr. Giuliani in an attempt to contain the damage to U.S. national security, and that Ambassadors Volker and Sondland, during this time period, met with members of the new Ukrainian administration and, in addition to discussing policy matters, sought to help Ukrainian leaders understand and respond to the differing messages they were receiving from official U.S. channels on one hand and Mr. Giuliani on the other. During this same time frame, multiple U.S. officials told me that the Ukrainian leadership was led to believe that a meeting or phone call between the president and President Zelensky would depend on whether Zelensky showed willingness to play ball on the issues that had been publicly aired by Mr. Lutsenko and Mr. Giuliani. Note, this was the general understanding of the state of affairs as conveyed to me by U.S. officials from late May to early July. I do not know who delivered this message to the Ukrainian leadership or when. See enclosure. Shortly after President Zelensky's inauguration, it was publicly reported that Mr. Giuliani met with two other Ukrainian officials, Ukraine's special anti-corruption prosecutor, Mr. Nazar Kolodnitsky, and a former Ukrainian diplomat named Andriy, I don't know, Telezenko. Both Mr. Kolodyetsky and Mr. Telezenko are allies of Mr. Litsenko and had made similar allegations in the above-mentioned series of articles in The Hill. On 13 June, the president told ABC's George Stephanopoulos that he would accept damaging information on his political rivals from a foreign government. On 21 June, Mr. Giuliani tweeted, "New Prez of Ukraine still silent on investigation of Ukrainian interference in 2016 and alleged Biden bribery of Poroshenko. Time for leadership and investigate both if you want to purge how Ukraine was abused by Hillary and Clinton people. In mid-July, I learned of a sudden change of policy with respect to U.S. assistance for Ukraine. See enclosure." And then I believe this is the enclosure. Supplementary classified information related to Section 2. According to multiple White House officials I spoke with, the transcript of the president's call with President Zelensky was placed onto a computer system managed directly by the National Security Council Directive for Intelligence Programs. This is a standalone computer system reserved for code word level intelligence information such as covert action. According to information I received from White House officials, some officials voiced concerns internally that this would be an abuse of the system and was not consistent with the responsibilities of the Director for Intelligence Programs. According to White House officials I spoke with, this was not the first time under this administration that a presidential transcript was placed into this code word level system solely for the purpose of protecting politically sensitive rather than national security sensitive information. Then there's a blacked out section relating to Section 4. I would like to expand upon two issues mentioned in Section 4 that might have a connection with the overall effort to pressure the Ukrainian leadership, as I do not know definitively whether the below-mentioned decisions are connected to the broader efforts I describe. I have chosen to include them in the classified annex. If they indeed present genuine policy deliberations and decisions formulated to advance U.S. foreign policy and national security, one might be able to make a reasonable case that these facts are classified. I learned from the U.S. officials on or about 14 May, the president instructed Vice President Pence to cancel his planned travel to Ukraine and to attend President Zelensky's inauguration on 20 May. Secretary of Energy Rick Perry led the delegation instead. According to these officials, it was also made clear to them that the president did not want to meet with Mr. Zelensky until he saw how Zelensky chose to act in office. I do not know how this guidance was communicated or by whom. I also do not know whether this action was connected with the broader understanding described in the unclassified letter that a meeting or phone call between the president and President Zelensky would depend on whether Zelensky showed his willingness to play ball on the issues that had been publicly aired by Mr. Litsenko and Mr. Giuliani. On July 18th, an Office of Management and Budget official informed departments and agencies that the president earlier that month had issued instructions to suspend all U.S. security assistance to Ukraine. That sounds an awful lot like a mafia or mob-style tactic. Suddenly you have no security because you didn't play ball. That's what the mafia used to do with their protection money. Used to come around asking for your protection money. Well, who do you need protection from? Us. The president knows that there's a threat to Ukraine from Russia, and so by removing all security assistance, it is now going to be open season on Ukraine, at least in theory. Perhaps the public airing of this has stifled or extinguished, at least temporarily, any effort by Russia to further take over Ukraine. Neither the Office of Management and Budget nor the National Security Council staff knew why this instruction had been issued. During interagency meetings on 23 July and 26 July, OMB officials again stated explicitly that the instructions to suspend this assistance had come directly from the president. They were still unaware of the policy rationale. As of early August, I heard from U.S. officials that some Ukrainian officials were aware the U.S. aid might be in jeopardy, but I do not know how or when they learned of it. And that is the end. That is the very, very end of the document. Obviously, it's not signed by a particular person because that person is a whistleblower and wishes to remain anonymous. And I cannot possibly understand why, being sarcastic here, that person would need to remain anonymous with the levels of security threats that are going around these days. So it's a very interesting prospect that if Ukraine does not play ball, then we remove Ukraine's assistance, monetary assistance for security efforts. Remember, Ukraine was more or less invaded by Russia a couple years ago. Remember that during the invasion, the Russians shot down a passenger plane with a Buk anti-air missile because they basically are untrained on their own systems and don't know how to properly engage targets or not. And so they thought that they could engage this airliner, which was some kind of, decoy or something like that, when it turned out, no, it was actually an airliner filled with innocent civilians. So that's what we're dealing with here. The president of the United States appears to be trying to intimidate Ukraine. I'm assuming because he can't intimidate or get Russia to do it for him, but rather if Ukraine is in this position of having security issues and we just threaten to remove our security, whatever, if they don't help the U.S. president, that's pretty self-serving. That's not a political move, or excuse me, that's not a foreign policy move in furtherance of the United States' interest. That's a foreign policy move in furtherance of the United States president's personal interests, which is, once again, the whole problem that I and others have with the president's administration is that he's not governing the country, he's enriching himself. And I'm a former Republican. I was a Republican for 23 years, right up until Bush started the war with Afghanistan, after telling everybody, or war with Iraq, after telling everybody that it was Afghanistan that attacked us. So it was obviously a ploy just to go after a country that had oil and not a ploy to go after the country that attacked us. And even then, the handling of the Afghanistan war and the Iraq war were absolutely abysmal. They did not seem to have any understanding of what kind of conflict we were throwing American citizens, young men and women, into combat. No understanding of that. And it was entirely cruel to put American citizens through that, in my humble opinion. This is far worse than that. This is way, way worse than that. This isn't President Bush or President Obama or President Clinton or other President Bush. This isn't them going to a foreign power and saying, hey, we need help with this war that benefits the American people. No, this is the U.S. president saying, help me personally or else. That's a seriously bad offense. It's a seriously self-serving and, frankly, some sort of treasonous offense. He is no longer operating, not that he ever really was, but he is clearly not operating in the interests of the country, let alone even close to the best interests of the country. Not that that's the standard. I happen to like that standard, but how would you enforce that? But he's clearly not operating within the interests of the country and clearly operating only in his own self-interest. And then he's calling anything that attacks his election politically, he's calling it a national security interest, and that is not how that works. It is not in the interest of national security whether he is elected or not.
So in my head, that I have concerns. So we have the president of Ukraine saying that he believed that aid was tied to launching an investigation. And you have the president of the United States saying you should investigate one of my political rivals. In the future, I don't want this to be something that gets repeated, whether it's Democrats or Republicans or whatever. I think it's very disturbing to me that you would be able to target your political opponents, and instead of directly going after them, you say, here, talk to my personal lawyer and get the information that you need in order to prosecute, or here, talk to my attorney general so we can privately discuss how you're going to prosecute this. That is kind of disturbing to me. And if this had been, I'm asking myself right now, like, if this had been a nobody, if this had been a Joe Blow, would I feel the same way? Like, am I reacting because it's a political opponent? Am I reacting because I'm not convinced that there is something there to prosecute? I'm not sure. But I definitely don't like the idea of influencing an election by getting a foreign country to investigate someone. It's not sitting well with me, and I wouldn't want Democrats or Republicans doing that.
FYI, the transcript has not been released. Yes. To be clear, none of you have read the phone call transcript because that hasn't been released. We literally just read how it was moved onto a national security server for code word level classified information, which is improper, very likely, and that means that we don't have the transcript. So, Blackleaf, it does appear that there was a word-for-word transcript. We literally read that. Here, I'll go back to the section here where he says that the transcript was moved. Of course, it's not OCR'd, so I have to look for it. I think it was on like page 7 or 8.
So for the term transcript, I think that people are wondering, in terms of the definition, people are kind of quibbling over the definition. So if it is a real-time people taking notes and writing it out, we have court reporters that do that, right? So it could be something similar to that. It could be that people are taking notes, but it's not verbatim in the sense that we don't speak grammatically correctly. I don't know if you guys have ever tried to transcribe an interview before, but people do not finish sentences, and they sometimes they start and stop things. And so when you transcribe, you can either do it verbatim with all of those pauses, ahs, and repeats, or you can clean it up and translate it into a correct grammatical sentence, which is what the person meant to say.
So it says here, the transcript was loaded into a separate electronic system that is used to store and handle classified information of an especially sensitive information. White House officials described this act as an abuse of the electronic system because the call did not contain remotely sensitive information. So that means that the transcript is still on that server, and we have not been released, and we have not seen or read the actual transcript of the call. What we read yesterday, not on stream, but what people saw yesterday was a summary, was someone's summary of it. And so both of these documents should be taken with a grain of salt. This is this complaint here that we're looking at is a whistleblower complaint, and it should be given some kind of credence, but it should not be taken as fact without further investigation. So this kind of complaint by an official involved with the White House, if not White House staff, but maybe intelligence community staff, has access to these calls and notes and conversations and reports from others in the intelligence community and the White House. And so this whistleblower complaint shouldn't be taken automatically as fact, but it also shouldn't be automatically dismissed. There should be an investigation, a legitimate, above-board, meaningful investigation, not a kangaroo court. Not sure why so many people are automatically concluding that this is one thing or another without an investigation. If these claims are true, this is absolutely treasonous. This is absolutely against the interests of the United States. This is personally enriching to the U.S. president. And it's not like we haven't seen other evidence of this. We cannot deny that the Air Force and other military were flying through parts of Scotland that they really had no business being in unless they were personally staying at Trump's resort. And that is also self-serving and maybe not treasonous, but certainly something worth investigating. This, however, asking Ukraine to not only conduct an investigation, but to make sure that they found certain things, that their aid package was tied to whether they conducted a successful investigation in the subjective eyes of Giuliani and President Trump. That's pretty damn treasonous. I don't see any reason why that would be anything less than an impeachable offense. We talked yesterday on stream that impeachment is basically the only remedy, and this seems to me like an open and shut kind of case if these things are true. Now, we're going to have an investigation and find out if these things are true, which is what's supposed to happen. Let's not forget there were 9 investigations into Benghazi costing millions and millions and millions of dollars. If you can do that for whatever they thought that Hillary was doing, well, then here you have actual evidence of wrongdoing, and you would need to fully investigate it. So I expect there to be nothing less than 9 investigations costing millions of dollars into this. You heard special counsel Robert Mueller say that the number one threat to the 2020 election and the integrity of the American political process is Russian interference in the upcoming election. That was the very first thing he said, and frankly, it was the only substantial thing that he said. He otherwise referred to his report, but he literally said the words, "I want you all to know that this most important thing is the most or biggest threat to American democracy is the upcoming interference in the upcoming election." Maybe not verbatim, but that's what he said. And that I don't understand how people can continue to deny that a Republican special counsel commissioned by a Republican party found evidence of wrongdoing, found things to be concerned about, and then the people who commissioned him dismiss him, and suddenly he's an agent for the Democrats. I'm being sarcastic, but that was more or less what the accusation is. This is all wildly hyperbolic, these reactions, and are completely unnecessary and completely unhelpful. I think the thought is that if we have enough hyperbolic reactions, then it'll muddy the waters and confuse the situation. And to an extent, that's true, but it's also massive hypocrisy. It's also something that none of these people who are saying that there should be no investigation, that of course they would want an investigation if it was their political rival. There's tremendous hypocrisy here, amazing double standards and mental discord. There is cognitive dissonance here between people seeing this and some people saying there's no cause for investigation. Of all the things, like what would be those people's line? And I think first you have to ask them, like, okay, where is the line? What would the president actually have to do? And I bet you'll find that no one actually from in that camp believes that their president should be investigated for anything whatsoever. And that's just obviously not true. There obviously must be a limit on presidential power. And if there's not, then we just have an authoritarian or a monarch. There absolutely must be checks on presidential power. There's nothing wrong with that. Certainly when Obama was president, there were plenty of people, the very same people, not even committing the fallacy of them being different groups of people. These are the exact same people who were very upset with Obama for everything, are now protecting Trump because all of this is a conspiracy. Every single thing is a massive conspiracy, and everyone is just making up everything. Well, great, prove it. I mean, if it's so easy, then prove it. And they haven't been able to because it is in some way true, and it needs to be investigated. We need to find out if any one particular witness is credible or not credible. We need to find out the truth and falsity of the accusations, and if they are true, we need to act swiftly and decisively to protect our democracy, to protect our republic. If Obama did this, I'd be saying the same thing. If Clinton did this, I'd be saying the same thing. If Bush did this, I was saying the same thing. I did not like President Bush after it was revealed that he was so willing to lie to the American people about the evidence we had for going into Iraq and then maintaining that for many years. And now it has come out that there was, in fact, not sufficient evidence to justify invading Iraq. At the time, I don't mean that they had a whole bunch of false or misinformation at the time. They knew that they had a light level of information that would never support invading Iraq, and instead they hid that and made it into a war that killed thousands of innocent people. And so I have no sympathy for people who kill thousands of innocent people, especially when it's unnecessary. Hardly ever necessary, I think, but especially in today's age of abundance and such, there is no reason why we can't use our resources for the good of everyone. So, Trump is not Bush. Come on, this is crazy. No one has said that Trump is Bush. You're crazy for trying to equate Trump with Bush. I'm allowed to compare current presidents to past presidents without you being able to successfully claim that I'm making them equivalent.
Would you like to thank some super chats?
Sure. Let's thank Joe Tyson for his $10, Dreamer Don for their $10, and Michael Pearce for their $10. Thank you very much for your contributions there. So that is the whistleblower report. In my opinion, it's 100% worth investigating. Whether or not every word of it is true needs to be determined if the presidential administration, including the president himself, is trying to circumvent normal national security procedures so that he can coerce or extort or influence the Ukrainian president to investigate Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, who aren't even the front runners in the election, but okay. If he's trying to get the Ukrainian president to say that the 2016 interference by Russia was actually a DNC coordinated effort through Ukraine, again, with no evidence whatsoever, that's all very personal and political and not national security related and not best interests of the country related, and definitely is worth an investigation and potential impeachment. Now, I'm not saying impeachment will be an easy thing. We discussed that yesterday on the other stream, but that's where we're headed. Is I fully expect that this investigation will flesh those things out, and if these things are found to be true, I fully expect the House to vote for articles of impeachment, and then we'll have quite a show in the Senate where the Senate currently politically favors the Trump administration. So exactly what's going to happen there? Nothing, probably nothing. I don't know. It'll be hard to ignore the articles of impeachment, though, that were voted on by the House. So as long as they put together a good package, it will be difficult for the Senate to reason its way out of it. Certainly the Senate has been doing lots of things that are unreasonable. We'll see.
I also wanted to quickly thank Negrey for the 1555 in the Polish zloty. I think that's how you say the currency. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jan, but that's
Polish zloty,
amazing. Yeah, that's an amazing name for a currency. It's almost as good as the Canadian loonie. Like, it's pretty good. I'm enjoying it.
Now, I don't know how to pronounce the next name, but Trawa Jacuard, I'm sure there's a better pronunciation of that. Thank you for the $10. Mr. French, you have inspired me to look into law as a way to better myself and others around me. Yes, definitely look into law, but also lawyers are miserable, so be careful about getting into the law and not having the mental health to deal with it. So it's a double-edged sword. Knowing more. I mean, when they say ignorance is bliss, Some part of it's true, but in ignorance, you also don't know why things are happening to you. And with lawyers, now you know why things are happening to you, and you know that about 40 million other things could happen to you too. So it's a constant state of being disturbed. Rad Willie, thank you for the $5. I think the inquiry should also investigate emoluments violations. I think they're going to investigate everything. So yeah, any emoluments violations in Scotland, as well as the ones in DC. He or she is referring to the Saudis overpaying at Trump's hotel, influencing him in the Yemeni genocide. So we'll try to stop with the allegations like that, because those things are all going to be investigated now, and we'll find out more about that later. For now, I put my faith in the open process. This is the whole point. If you have a closed process that has no checks and balances, no independent eyes, no eyes from the opposing side, then it can all be very self-serving. People complain basically incessantly about police brutality, and when they go and investigate the internal affairs organization for that police department, suddenly finds no violation of law, even when there were very, very, very clear violations of law on behalf of police officers. This is the same thing. If Trump investigates himself and declares himself not in violation of anything, that doesn't mean anything except that he is an egocentric, arrogant person who doesn't understand the rule of law, the checks and balances, and obviously doesn't want any eyes on him in that way. If people aren't watching him, then he can get away with whatever he wants to get away with. I mean, that's the ideas of a 6-year-old. This is the maturity level of a 6-year-old child who wants to just get away with everything and not have any consequences. All of us know that the president is elected to govern the country. There is no reason why the president should be against half of the country and actively taking steps to suppress any normal political opposition. It's one thing to make your own political speeches and your own political movements to attempt to convince the populace that they should vote for you. It's another thing to ask a foreign government, which, by the way, Joe Biden can't go ask a foreign government, or Leonard French can't go ask a foreign government. So only someone in the position of power already could go ask a foreign government to help them stay in power. That is the most corrupt thing I've heard since I read Red Notice by Bill Browder about Putin and his taking over of the oligarchy of Russia. Not a false story, not a false claim, quite a documented situation. And you can go read Red Notice by Bill Browder and read all about it. Bill Browder, by the way, is a major finance person in the world. He has a lot of experience in the financial world. He's a very wealthy person. So if you put your stock in wealthy people, which it seems like a lot of people do, then Bill Browder should have a lot of stock, because he's a very wealthy person whose money was taken away by President Putin. So go read that if you have any questions about how corrupt Russia is and why the United States president would be asking a corrupt nation to help him win an election. So that's what's happening. Anyway, have a good day, everybody. I'm going to get back to it and enjoy rewatching the stream if you haven't watched the whole thing. I'll see you in the next video that drops. Tomorrow will probably be the Thunderfoot video. Remember, Thunderfoot was taken down by May and Jay. Maya, do we ever figure out how to pronounce her name? May and Jay.
I think we're just supposed to say May J. Like
May
ignore
J.
the I.
But there's an and in there as well.
Okay.
It's May I and J, and May I is like written as one word, and then and is lowercase, and then J is capitalized. So I could not tell you how it's pronounced. Anyway, so yeah, the little Thunderfoot video will probably drop tomorrow. So and we'll have a few more videos for you. The Fallout 76 helmet has been recalled, and I think that was what we got to last night. So anyway, love you all. I'm Leonard French, your favorite copyright attorney. I don't know, can we get any dogs back in here? Let's get a dog back in here.
Yeah. After all of this, I feel like I need a dog. I feel like I need to see Nico's ears.
Yes. Nico. Hup. Oh, what a good boy.
People
he's
who have
ready for
watched
that.
these streams will know that I love Nico's ears. I think that they have this beautiful crimp to the fur that looks
Yes,
like
they
it's
do.
been professionally done.
Yes, they have a
But
little
no, he
wavy
just
crimp
woke
to
up
them.
like that.
Yep, it's just his breeding, I guess. So, extreme breeding. Hopefully he's an extremely healthy dog. So far, he's extremely healthy.
He just looks like a
Get
fashion
off.
model of a dog.
Yes. And let's get Ilsa. Ilsa, come. Come on. You want to? Come here. Come here. You don't have to get Hup if you want. If you don't want. You're a good girl. You're a good girl. So yeah, those are my puppies. All right. I love you guys. Stay cool. Have a good beginning of your fall. I'll see you in the video that drops tomorrow. Love you all. Bye.